So this clip is kind of wild, man. This popped up on my timeline. Now, Piers Morgan is one of those guys where half the time he talks and you're like, he's the smuggest, most arrogant prick in the world and I hate him. And then the other half the time he talks and you go, he's not that bad, right? So he went on that Triggernometry podcast and, man, he kind of has a masterclass here in sort of deconstructing their pro-Israel beliefs. Watch this.
You're never going to get rid of this problem until every Palestinian has the same human rights that you do. Right? They have to have the same rights as you. And if they don't, why shouldn't they? Explain to me why they don't have the same rights. Explain to me when this all started and Israel's first response was to turn off the energy and the water and the food supplies into Gaza. Right there, you had evidence of the...
I want you to pay attention to the Triggernometry hosts' faces. I want you to pay attention to that as we go here.
Occupation, as the critics of Israel have called this for many decades, that when you have a power like Israel that has the ability to turn off large swathes of energy and water into another country, right? that is a form of occupation, whether they want to call it that or not. That cannot be sustainable going forward. You've got to offer people in Palestine equal rights. You've got to give them the chance to self-govern properly, not being run by a terror group, but by people who are more moderate, as we found in Northern Ireland. You've got to have big leaders who come forward who genuinely want peace. I don't think Hamas want peace. I don't think Netanyahu wants peace. He showed no sign of wanting to actually have a peace settlement to this in his entire tenure as Prime Minister. So I think you need clear new leadership to sort this out. So I took that as my starting point. They have a right and a duty to defend themselves. But very quickly into it, it was clear that the scale of the response from Israel was going to be pretty much unprecedented. And then the question becomes, what is too much? What is acceptable? What strays into potential war crimes? At what point does your right to defend itself give you the right to obliterate large sections of Gaza and tens of thousands of innocent people, particularly given that half the population is under 18? I mean, that's a staggering number of children. What I've felt is that, and you're starting to see a splinter now in leading members of the Israeli political sphere, is that they haven't really got an end game for what happens after the war. And I've been asking that question for months. Well, what do you do when this is over? And there's no answer. A lot of Gaza has been completely destroyed. People's homes are gone. They're now attacking what they say are the last remnants of Hamas, but I suspect there's a lot more Hamas left than we think. They're now attacking them in a refugee camp where they've sent over 1 million people. Right? None of that sits easily with me, and I don't think with many people who are not on the extremity of this debate. So I don't know what the end game is here. You're seeing now Netanyahu sort of suggesting we're nearing the end of the war. Well, how? You haven't got rid of Hamas. That was your stated mission. And it's an interesting thing with public opinion in Israel, because the polls suggest that they support the elimination of Hamas, majority of people in Israel, but they do not support Netanyahu personally. And so the moment this war's over, he's almost certainly going to be out of a job, and then he goes in to face corruption charges in a trial. Where's the incentive for Netanyahu to end this war? And he's being driven by some very right-wing members of his cabinet, Smotrich and Ben Gvir and others. And their language, I have to say, I do think some of the language, some of those people...
The automatic subtitles are wrong in many ways, but this is still a great clip.
...been using has been genocidal. And I can understand why people are very fearful that that is what they really want to do, drive Palestinians from Gaza irrevocably. So, what happens now? How do we go back to any kind of normality? What happens to the people who've been displaced, who've lost their homes? What happens to the ideology which fueled all this to start with? Has that been made worse? The ideology behind Hamas is actually been fueled by what's happened. If you've had a child who's been killed, are you more or less likely to gravitate to the people that you may perceive in your mind have acted as some kind of resistance? I don't know. But it's going to be a huge question for what happens, I think, after this is over.
When you lose the Western centrists who have every single incentive to buy your bullshit propaganda, you're in trouble, dog. You're in trouble. Piers Morgan is nobody's leftist. Honestly, he's barely a liberal, right? He's barely I'm sure he would call himself a classical liberal, like Dave Rubin or whatever he says. But functionally, he's more of an enlightened centrist, or maybe even center-right, in terms of, like, if you go through his content and see the topics he covers and how he talks about them, he's effectively more of a centrist or center-right type person. And even he's like, I don't know, bro. Sort of walks like a duck and quacks like a duck. That shit might be a duck. I hear a lot of genocidal comments, and I kind of understand why people are like, that looks like a genocide. You don't say. You don't say. So remember, The Lancet came out the other day and said there's 186,000 dead Palestinians. And they came to that number by doing what they called a conservative calculation of what would normally happen in a conflict and the numbers we know in real time and how that's extrapolated out into the future and how much we miss in the moment, etc. And so look, you have anywhere from, Euromed Monitor has it as 47,000 dead Palestinians, about 90% of them civilians. The Lancet has it at 186,000 Palestinians. Guys, these are not just numbers. I'm going to be clear about that. These are people. These are moms and dads and sons and daughters and nieces and nephews and uncles and aunts and people with detailed life stories and histories and occupations and hobbies and interests and, they love people, and these are human beings. 186,000. Do you understand how aggressive the Israeli propaganda campaign has had to be to try to get people to turn away from this, to look away, to not pay attention, to say, it's okay, I guess they're defending themselves or something? This was Piers Morgan's default intuition, was like, yeah, they have a right to defend themselves and they have a duty to defend themselves. That was his initial reaction. And he stuck with that for a very long time. And then finally, eventually, something snapped and he was like, I'm not so sure this is about defending themselves. I don't see any defending here. I see a lot of aggression. I see a lot of offense. That's what I see. So, look, from his lips to God's ears, this is also a good sign in this sense. If you're losing Western centrists, who's going to be left soon, right? Who's going to be left? I don't know. But what we're really banking on when it comes to Israel is Israel losing the entire world. Basically, every country saying, sorry, we're cutting off economic ties with you. You're done. We have no interest in trading with you anymore. You're done. And some countries have already done that. But what we need is every country to do that. So they're hurt so much economically that they're forced to the table and they're forced to be reasonable and give Palestinians human rights. And I don't know how far away we are from that, but we should have been there a long time ago. Let's just say that. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.